look, it's rock soup. What do we got in there?
Well, we put a rock in it, and then put some water in, and then we opened up the fridge and found whatever we could find, and we put it in. Rock Soup Los Angeles Edition 1. We've taken the show from Toronto, and now we're gonna do this thing and show you some spots in Los Angeles. I've got my boy Josh here with me. Hello. And in the back we have Aimee-Lynn Chadwick, singer extraordinaire. She's gonna be commenting on some of her experiences, good and bad, in the studio, and what it takes to make a singer be able to do their absolute best. So Amy, why don't you tell us, what's the difference between a good recording session and a bad one?
I've had some of my best experiences recording vocals even in the bathroom of certain places. You don't really need the best studio or not necessarily even the best gear. It's just, you need to have an idea of what you want to do and a knowledge of working your equipment.
And we're going to be going to the Capitol Records building. They recorded everything from Frank Sinatra and the Beatles to Coldplay and Iron Maiden. The building itself is designed to look like a stack of 45s with a needle on top. Actually blasts a beam of light in Morse code that spells Hollywood.
It was built in 1956. Mid-2008, there was a big hoodoo. A condo company wanted to build next door to it a big condo, and the parking garage was going to destroy some acoustic reverb chambers that had been built by Les Paul, the inventor of multi-track recording, amongst other things like the electric guitar, tape delay. So he co-designed it, and the parking garage dug into and destroyed these things. I think there's 8 chambers, and they're pretty long. They're like 45 feet long, and there's a speaker down there and a microphone, one at each end. The idea is you pump music. Speaking of, pump music here at Hollywood and Highland. This is where they do the Academy Awards and all that kind of fun stuff, the Oscars.
So what's the difference between a digital plug-in that gives you reverb called a chamber reverb and something like the actual chambers that are built below Capitol Records?
It just gives you a better understanding if you actually see it. You can actually create those things on your own if you have a garage, or if you're fortunate enough to have a large concrete room at your disposal or something like that, with reflective walls. You can create your own reverb chambers by putting a microphone at one end and a speaker at the other.
We're going to look at a couple of ways in which, when we're tracking guitars, for example, we set up a separate mic further away from the amp source.
Down here, you'll see a close-mic'd amplifier, which is, we're using a Beta 57A, Shure Beta 57A. And over here, we have a Audio-Technica 4033. You notice there's about 4 feet, maybe 4.5 feet of distance between here and here. The reason we're doing that is to create a feeling of physical space in between. Well, so as if your head was here and your head was here. What we're gonna do is actually double the track. So we'll play it once, record it down like this, and then play it again, record it down like this, and then spread them wide so it sounds like a stereo pair.
And that brings in a very specific and difficult to recreate feel, unless of course you reamp or whatever later. Having a room mic gives a sense of air that's moving. It has a slightly different characteristic. There's a proximity effect. When a mic is closer to a source, it's a little clearer and brighter. When you move it away, it actually is a little more muffled, meaning you lose some top end information, you get more bass information. And you can combine those things. You'll see that there's a way of putting a mic behind an amp so you can get the front and back of the mic. And then you got to worry about things like phase.
Hollywood.
Fine. So there behind me is the very famous Capitol Records. I've actually had the fortune of going down to the studios in the basement, and it was kind of interesting because it wasn't as high-tech or anything as you'd expect it to be. It sort of still felt like an older studio. I think it has a lot to do with the space, the history of the place, the people that work there, the people that understand the stuff, more so than the fact that it's some super high-tech studio.
So does that make a difference, do you think? Like location and like, does it influence the creative process? Do you think?
Absolutely. When I had to go and record at Capitol, I was producing an artist they'd asked us to write a 4-song demo for.
Right.
And I actually found I had a better time recording that record in my apartment 6 blocks away than in the Capitol Records basement.
There it is. It's pretty spectacular, actually, for someone like me, because a lot of history here. So this is the parking lot, which was going to be the future site of a big condo, whose parking garage would have destroyed the reverb chambers underneath, which extend out, I think, like 35, 40 feet underneath in the basement, and it's 25 feet down. So they're quite massive.
I think the value that it has now is just being able to be backed up by a large company, by the name Capitol. Other than that, there's no reason to even have a major label other than money.
Some of my least favorite experiences recording in a studio were in the big studios, like Capitol Records, like Cherokee. But there are some smaller ones that are quite famous, like the Sunset Sound Room, and those are places where I think it's about a certain sense of intimacy. One of the things I want to talk about in this episode is the importance of play and how much you have to have fun in order for something to come across well. Has to work too hard on a certain passage, then the reader will also have to work hard to get through that passage. It's the same thing as recording a record. If you don't actually have a certain amount of velocity that comes from fun, from freedom, then that will be also lacking from the record. I know on my last record, we spent an awful lot of time working with Pro Tools because we'd recorded things in different places at different times and we wanted to make it match. But what I found at the end of that all was that all of a sudden, it wasn't very interesting anymore. So we got rid of all the comps that we had made of everything and re-recorded all of those guitars from the assembly of parts in a really loose and easy setting. And all of a sudden the whole thing had a ton more life to it. So the importance of play. Capitol Records is great to say, hey, I worked at Capitol Records, I recorded in the big studio, but it doesn't mean you're gonna get a better result. It's more important to have fun wherever you are than to get into these kind of big places. That's with all due respect. Do you ever feel like you're being watched?